All right, well let's go ahead and continue on. A long time ago, back in 2008, I actually visited Andres' home country, South Africa. I visited a couple different times, but one time was in 2008. And when we were there, I was there visiting, so I was doing the tourist thing, and going and seeing all the sights and all. But one of the things that impressed me the most was, this is going to sound strange, was a fire. And it was a unique fire because what it was outside Grosskopf, there's a sawmill, and there's a big furnace where they burn all the sawdust and everything that they produce all day long. And so we went at night and watched it, and then we were a long ways off, and you could still feel the heat from it and everything else. But it was just amazing to watch that fire, and the fire shooting out of the chimney on the top, and the fire kind of, little holes poking out here and there and everywhere else, and the glow of it, and even the smell of the wood smoke. I did love that smell. I told Nancy one time, if I could, ever create a cologne, one would be called wood smoke and the other one would be called barbecue. Okay, but I just love that smell, that wood smoke smell, and so you have this big raging fire, but it was very, very peaceful to me. It was just peaceful to watch and peaceful to listen to and peaceful to see. Now, I should have took some video of it, but we didn't. But that's actually the furnace right there. That's part of the what we were looking at that day. And it doesn't look very big there, but this thing was huge, and it was sparks and everything else coming all over. And as I was thinking about this week, and I was thinking about what we're going to talk about, peace in the fire, I was reminded of that, and reminded that we can have peace in the middle of a fire. That when things are going terribly, horribly, terrifically wrong, we can find peace. When it doesn't seem like we can get anywhere because we're just spinning our wheels, as we say, and not moving, we can find peace. So that's what we're going to talk about, peace in the fire today. And we're going to look in Daniel chapter 2. That's where we're going to find our story. And it's not the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, because they actually went into the fire. But just a little bit of hint, we're going to reference that story next week, because we're going to talk about worship in the fire next week. But this is peace in the fire today, Daniel chapter 2. Let's pray and go to God and ask him to teach us something this morning. Father, as I hear before your people, your children, your loved ones, I ask that you help them not to hear my words, but to hear your words. And Father, teach us something that can help us in our daily lives when we're going through the fires, when we're going through the storms, when we're going through the tumultuous bad times, that will give us peace because we're relying on you. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. All right, so we kind of started all this because I read this verse and memorized this verse a few weeks ago, actually a few months ago. It says, "Answer me when I call to you, my righteous God." Okay? "Give me relief from my distress." When I first read this and I first started to memorize this, that was the statement that really hit home with me. Give me relief from my distress. Have mercy on me and hear my prayers. And so we talked about how Psalms 3 is kind of, you can kind of use it like a prayer in starting the day. And in Psalms 4, you can kind of use it as a prayer in ending the day. And last week we looked at another verse about calling out to God in Second Chronicles chapter 15. It says this, it says, "But in their distress they turned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and sought him, and he was found by him." And this was advice. It was a kind of a pep speech given to King Asa, and King Asa was making some reforms, and the prophet came to him and was basically telling him, hey, the people changed. The people went back to God, and they saw him out and in their times of distress, and they found him, and he has set everything right again, and he's there helping you and with you. And then I'm going to give you a verse out of Hebrews today. It says, "So let us come boldly to our throne of our gracious God. There we will receive his mercy, and we will find grace to help us when" what? "We need it the most." Now, I don't know about you, but when things are going well, I don't tend to think I need very much help. But when things are going badly, that's when I say I need a lot of help. Okay? We can go to God at any time, but God's saying, hey, come to me, tell me, share your burdens with me, let me know. So, as I said, the last couple of weeks, we went through these different things, and don't know why one side is really small, but we went through those things. I'm not going to go through them again right now, just leave them up there for a few seconds for you to look at them. But basically, start off the day, you know it's going to be a stressful day, you know it's going to be a hard day, so you focus on God. And you focus on God by sharing your life with God, telling Him you trust in Him, looking for Him for encouraging, knowing that God takes notice, okay? And just making the decision saying, God, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you in this day. I'm going to trust you in what I'm facing. And then at the end of the day, you go back through and you continue to ask for help. God, that was a hard day. Help me out, okay? But key to it is that you also kind of ponder today and you think about it in a godly light, in how God would deal with it and how God is in control and how God is there. And you take that and you take that time to pray, to honor God, to if you're dealing with individuals that you feel like are enemies against you, then you lift them up in prayer and pray that God will help them to see the light and help them to understand. And you seek and find your peace in God. So we do those type of things, okay? Now, today, in the middle of the storm, to find peace, it's still the number one thing is still the same thing. I just worded it in a different way. Pour your heart out to God. Okay? This is the key to all the rest of it. Is when we pour our heart out to somebody, who is it usually? It's somebody we trust. Okay? Now, there may be some of you that just pour your heart out to anybody, but I'm not that type of person. It's somebody I trust. And so when I start pouring my heart out to God, I'm trusting in God, and I'm showing I trust in God. Look at this verse, Psalm 62, verse 8. My people trust in Him at all times. Okay? Then what? Pour out your heart to Him, for God is our refuge. And God's saying, you can come to me. You can pour your heart out to me. I'm ready to listen. I'm ready to help you. I'm ready to be there for you. I'm ready to comfort you. I'm ready to give you peace. We sang about He's the God of hope. He's the God of peace. He's the God of comfort. Different things. We sing those type of songs all the time. That's what God is. And so He said, I'm there for you. But then we get to Daniel. In Daniel chapter 2, and I said this is Daniel's firestorm. This is my original title for the... Well, okay. Oh, there we go. It was the original title for the sermon was Daniel's firestorm, because Daniel went through a firestorm. A firestorm is you can define a firestorm as simply as it's a fire that's so big, it's so raging, it's so hot, it consumes everything around it, and it grows and it grows and it grows and it grows. And there's this picture of a forest fire in California, and growing up in Wyoming, we saw forest fires every once in a while. One of the unique things about forest fires is that the trees themselves will get so hot that all of a sudden they'll just blow up. Okay? And that's how we feel sometimes when we're going through these difficulties, is that we got so much pressure inside, we're just about ready to blow. Daniel didn't want to be like that. He wanted to honor God in what he did. So let's look at his firestorm, okay? His firestorm was created by King Nebuchadnezzar. Actually, it wasn't King Nebuchadnezzar, it was King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And he had this dream. He woke up and he says, I need to understand what this dream is, because dreams were a big thing, especially dreams of leaders and kings during this time period, because they believed that dreams were often foreshadowing what was to come. So if you had a dream and you were able to know what was coming because of that dream, then you would be a better king. You could head off trouble, or you could prepare for things. Think about the story of Joseph. When Pharaoh had his dream and Joseph interpreted the dream, and so they stored grain for 7 years because there was going to be 7 years of famine after that. And Joseph basically saved not just the Egyptians, but saved a lot of the world at that time because of his able to interpret the dream, and Pharaoh believing in him and putting his trust in him and sending him to make sure that they stored enough grain. So dreams were very, very important. So Nebuchadnezzar had this dream, and he said this. He said, I've had a dream that deeply troubles me, and I must know what it means. So you're a king. What do? You call together all your wise men, okay, your most trusted advisors, and you share with them your dream, and you tell them about what your dream is. Now, Nebuchadnezzar threw him a curveball, though, because he didn't want to tell them his dream. He said, you guys are so wise, then you tell me what my dream was, and then you interpret it. Now, Nancy's not here. I can say this morning. Sometimes she does that to me, okay? I'm just supposed to know what she's thinking, or I'm just supposed to know what she's feeling. And some of you are smiling because you've done that to your boyfriends or husbands and things like that too, okay? And sometimes I have no clue. I'm totally clueless. Well, his astrologers, his wise men, his fortune tellers, his sorcerers, they were all clueless. They didn't know. And so they started arguing. If you notice, this is verse 11. If you see it was verse 3 before. They started arguing with the king. Well, the king, you're asking something impossible. You can't do this. How can we possibly tell you what you dreamed, okay? Can you tell me what I'm thinking right now? Some of you probably, yes, I can, but because I'm a simple person, but they're like, we can't do that. Well, look what it says. It says, the king's demand is impossible. No one except the gods can tell your dream. A little bit of foreshadowing there, huh? No one but the gods. And they do not live here among our people. Well, that didn't make King Nebuchadnezzar very happy. It says he was furious when he heard this, and he ordered that all the wise men of Babylon be executed. Now, in some of the verses that we didn't read, one of the things that the king Nebuchadnezzar said, it said, if someone can do this for me, I will heap great honor upon them. But he said, if you can't, you all die. And it was not just the ones really close to him. He was gonna do the whole thing. He was gonna start over fresh. So every single wise man, every single sorcerer, every single fortune teller, every single one in the whole kingdom were going to be executed. So it gets to verse 13. Because the king's decree, men were sent to find and kill Daniel and his friends. Daniel's firestorm. Can you imagine getting word, hey, someone's coming to kill you today? A little bit scary, wouldn't it be? It'll be a little bit of a storm. So the word was sent out. People were sent to go find Daniel and his friends, and Daniel and his friends were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was some of his friends. It was some of the others that were brought in, Jewish captives that were brought in, that were put into the king's court. We're going to read a verse later about that, okay? When Arioch, the commander of king's guard, came to kill them, Daniel handled the situation with wisdom and discretion. He didn't sit on the floor, and start crying and wailing, oh, poor me, I'm going to die, everything else. He didn't, see him coming, try to hide from him. He didn't see him coming and try to kill him himself before he killed him. It just says he handled the situation with wisdom and discretion. Look at the next verse. Well, actually, here's our second thing. Remain calm, okay, when you're in that firestorm. Use wisdom and diplomacy, just like I said Daniel did. Now look at this verse. He asked Arioch, why has the king issued such a harsh decree? So King Arioch told him all that happened. Now I got a couple questions here. begin with, it's not really a question, but I think we can probably assume Daniel already knew the answer to that question, because they didn't have, they didn't have Line, they didn't have Twitter, they didn't have, Instagram, they didn't have all this other social media stuff back then. But the word still got out and went out very quickly among people when something like this was happening. So he probably already kind of knew. But here is one of the king's trusted, probably soldiers, coming to kill him. And he stops and asks him, why did Arioch stop? Why did he stop and listen to Daniel's question? Daniel was not a man of authority at this time. We know later he becomes a man of authority. But at this time, he's not a man of authority. He's just somebody in the king's service. He's a wise man in the king's service that is to be executed. Those were the king's orders. I'm going to follow the king's orders. I'm going to kill this person. So why would I stop and listen to Daniel if I was Arioch? Made me ponder a little bit. Made me think about it a little bit. You go back, let's go one or two more verses. It said, Daniel went at once to see the king and requested some more time to tell him what the dream meant. I think I skipped a verse. So Arioch told him what happened. So Daniel went at once to the king. Now, again, why was Daniel able to go to the king? He wasn't invited to begin with. He wasn't part of the inner circle of wise men that were invited there to interpret the king's dream. So why now could he go to the king and request more time? There's a couple different things. Why would Daniel go to the king and request more time so that he can interpret it? Because he had confidence in God already. He had trust in God already. He went to the king and said, I just need some time. I need time to pray. I need time to seek my God out, who will tell me the meaning of your dream, and I can tell it to you. But I need some time. He was confident that that would happen. The second thing is I think, is kind of in this point here about bracing up or shoring up for a godly life. When storms come in, when we see typhoons coming in or hurricanes coming in, if you're in the other hemisphere, if you see those things coming, what do? You tie down things. One of the things, I live over there near China Trust, and there's a software park, and there's all kinds of trees out there, and in a couple of days before a typhoon comes in, you see guys out there all tying ropes everywhere and all over the place, okay? And you have to be careful sometimes even walking, because if you're not paying attention, you'll hit a rope. But they are there shoring things up. They're getting things ready. They're preparing for it. And I think that we can prepare for storms in our lives, that we can have peace in the middle of the storm of life if we're prepared as well. Look at this verse, Daniel chapter 1, verse 19. The king talked with them, okay? So if you remember Daniel chapter 1, they were taken into exile. They were brought into the king's service. They had a royal banquet for them. There are all kinds of foods they can eat. Daniel looked at it and said, well, these are a lot of foods I can't eat because of my commitment to God and my commitment to my religion. So he spoke up. He was bold again. He said, I can't eat these foods. And the advisor that was over them, their guard or their leader that was over them said, well, you have to eat this, because if you don't eat this and I take you to the king and you're poor and you're unhealthy, then the king's going to be really mad at me, take my life, whatever else, I don't know. But Daniel said, hey, for 10 days, test this out. We'll eat what's good for us. We'll eat what's on our diet and see if we're not healthier than those who eat from the king's table. And that's what they did. And Daniel and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, probably a few others, were all healthier. And so they were brought before the king, and the king was impressed about it. And he also was impressed as he talked with them and as he listened to them. So, and he got the four of them listed there. And it says, so they entered his royal service. They had already impressed the king before. Daniel probably, even though he didn't have power, was probably already well known. It was probably known that he prayed 3 times a day, because he did it openly. He kneeled down in front of his window so all could see him praying, not to bring glory upon himself, but to set example to others and to show others his devotion and love of God. And so my thought is the reason that Ariel did not execute him right away, but stopped to listen to him, because he probably had respect for Daniel already, because how Daniel had lived his life. So we're in the middle of a storm. How we live our life going into that storm can impact us in the middle of that storm as well. Look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 11 and 12. It says, make it your goal to live a quiet life, minding your own business and working with your hands, just as we instructed you before. That's verse 11. Okay? Basically, he says, hey, work with all your heart, as working unto God, not unto men, as he says in Colossians. But look at the then part of it. Then people who are not believers will respect the way you live, and you will not need to depend on others. I just did it again. Every time I touch that thing, it doesn't, okay? You don't need to depend on others. I go back to Daniel. I think this is what happened. He didn't need to depend on the kindness of that soldier, or whoever came to kill him, because he could depend on God, because he lived his life for God. And they saw that and they respected it for him, so they were willing to stop and listen. The king already be impressed with him, probably following with him a little bit, knowing what was, knowing them and seeing them, being impressed by them already. And the king was willing to listen to Daniel, who asked for more time. Okay? It says, then Daniel went home and told his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azra, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that's different names for them, what had happened. So here's our next thing. Share your burden. Okay? Sometimes Nancy in the middle of the day will send me line messages. If she can call, she'll call, but sometimes she can't call because she's in a big office with the other people. So she'll send me line messages. This is going on, this is going on, this is going on, this is happening, this is happening. She's sharing her burden at that time. We need people to share our burden with. And, it's okay. I'm here. You can call me. You can ask me to meet you. Whatever else. I'm meeting somebody this week, 2 people this week for coffee on 2 different days, just because we're going to talk about life and what life is for that reason. Share your burden. Find somebody to share your burden with. I have people that I share my burden with, and that 2 of them are not even here in Taiwan. Okay? But I can share with them, and one thing that's great about sharing with them, they have no idea who anybody is here, so I can just share with them, and they just give me a complete, honest evaluation. Okay? Share your burden. And they don't have to give you feedback, but they can. He urged them, okay, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, he urged them to ask the God of heaven to show them his mercy by telling him the secret, so they would not be executed along with the other wise men of Babylon. I like this because not only does he ask them to pray, he gives them a reason to pray. Yeah? Yeah. Well, sometimes it's like when I tell Joshua and Jonathan, I tell them they need to do something, and they say, why? It's because, I'm your father, and if you don't do this, blah, 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 blah. Give them a reason. And he said, hey, pray with me. Ask the God of heaven to show us mercy. Okay? He didn't ask the God of heaven to give him the answer. He just said to show his mercy. Now, I'm assuming he's thinking that's probably part of that is the answer. Okay? So we ask for help and pray. If you got my line, send me a line in the middle of the day and say, hey, just pray for me. That's all you have to say, or you can tell me about it. Okay? And I will pray for you right then. I got a little app on my phone that I'll type in your name, pray for so-and-so. And then I can set it to remind me every hour. Well, actually, I can set it any time limit I want to. And usually I set it up to remind me every day. And so every day at that same time, it'll remind me. Okay, pray for this person. Pray for this person. And I will do that. I'll keep it on there for about a week, and then I'll take you off unless I hear from you that I still need to pray for me. Do that. Ask people to pray and to help you, and give them a reason to pray. Okay? I have a big job interview. This could really change the course of my life. Please pray for me and for God's mercy in this. Ask for specific reasons. That night, the secret was revealed to Daniel in a vision. And then Daniel praised the God of heaven. See, he went through those 5 things. All the way through trusting God. From the point that he asked for more time to he asked what was going on, he was continually trusting God. He was able to do that because of the life that he had lived up to that point. But he knew he couldn't do it by himself. So he reached out to people, shared with them what was going on, asked them to pray, and they all trusted God, and the secret was revealed. And I like the last part of that. It says, then Daniel praised the God of heaven. Daniel stopped and worshiped right then. In the next 4 verses, that's what we see. We see him worshiping. But that's our bonus. You worship God in the midst of the impossible. And next week, we're going to talk about worshiping when you're coming out of the fire. Because there's another story, as I mentioned earlier, the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they were actually literally in the fire. And God was there with them, and they were able to worship him. We'll talk about more of that next week. So here you are, to have peace in the fire. What do? You pour out your heart to God. You remain calm. Don't panic. Don't get really upset. Okay, it's okay to have emotion. No doubt about that. It'll be emotional. But you remain in control. You use wisdom. You use diplomacy. You think about how to interact with the people that you have to deal with and how you could get the best results and the best things. You brace up or you shore up by living a godly life. Not at that moment. Well, at that moment, sure, of course. But even before that. So you start right now. Focusing on God. Focusing on your relationship with God. You share your burden with others and ask them to pray. And then what you'll find is you'll be like Daniel. You'll see God's answer, and you'll be able to worship him in the midst of that fire and coming out of the fire. Let's go to God in prayer.